A story of me and a few army buddies using a Ouija board in Tombstone, Arizona. This actually happened and is 100% true. I wanted to start out by saying the story is 100% true. I know people will say that to add immersion, but it really is, and this is the only place I knew where to post it at. Do I believe everything that happened actually happened? Not necessarily. I'm as skeptical as you will be, and I welcome any explanation as to how the events that occurred were not supernatural. It could have been an elaborate prank on behalf of my friends, but there are several reasons why I find that hard to believe. Mass hysteria, maybe? Who knows? Anyway, here is the story. I enlisted in the Army in 2009 and had my AIT, Advanced Individual Training, in Fort Huachuca, AZ. Pretty much any soldier stationed at Fort Huachuca, often nicknamed Fort Ouija, has above-average intelligence. Most of the MOSCS require a very high ASVAB score. Needless to say, the friends I made were a unique bunch, many of us gaming nerds. Huachuca is about 20 minutes from the Mexican border and about 40 minutes from the infamous Tombstone, Arizona. One day we were bored and swapping ghost stories. One of my buddies bought a Ouija board at Walmart for us to play around with. We'll call him Jackson, to protect his identity. I'm not sure Jackson believed in the supernatural, but when your disposable income to free time ratio is skewed horribly in the wrong direction, you buy stupid shit to entertain yourself with. Jackson and I attempted to use the Ouija board in our barracks, as the base is extremely old and rife with hauntings. Unfortunately, the barracks we had recently moved to were brand new, so the Ouija didn't work. Tired of strip clubs and flirting with the Mexican border, we hungered for a unique adventure. I brought up the idea of traveling to nearby Tombstone. Jackson lit up when I mentioned this, as he had just heard a story of a haunted house in Tombstone he wanted to check out. We came to a quick, ghost-hunting consensus and invited our buddy Thompson along for the ride. We arrived at Tombstone shortly after dark. It was not quite how I expected it. I had pictured a literal ghost town, with a few dilapidated Wild West buildings and the obligatory tumbleweed blowing through the street. This was not the case at all. Even at night, it's basically a normal town with a few historical buildings and tourist traps. In addition to the downtown stretch, they have a residential area just like any other small town in America. It was in this residential area that we began hunting for the supposed haunted house. We got to the area we thought it was in, but weren't sure which house it was. After a few minutes of circling the block, the group decided to take a break to piss. Everyone went a separate direction to pee, but I could not find a place private enough, so I didn't go. I was the second person back in the car. I climbed into the back seat and asked Jackson, "Where's Thompson?" "I don't know. He's been gone for a while. I'll text him," said Jackson. All of a sudden, Thompson, looking whiter than he normally does, comes sprinting towards the car and frantically tries to open the passenger door. Jackson calmly unlocks the door and lets him in and asks, "What happened?" "Dude, you're not going to believe this shit," Thompson gasped. His southern drawl tightened like a cello string. "I was in this house that looked abandoned, right? So I go in and look around and decide to have a smoke. I look down at my phone to text you guys and tell you about it when all of a sudden something touched my shoulder." "Holy shit, what was it?" I asked. "Nothing. There was nothing there." I sprinted back to the car. Pumped with adrenaline, curiosity, and stupidity, I suggested we go full mystery machine and park in a nearby lot and use the Ouija board from inside the car. As soon as we could get parked, roughly half a block away, we anxiously pulled out the Ouija board and put it in our laps. As the person designated to ask questions, I began. "Is there anyone there?" To my disbelief, the planchette started moving. It slowly but surely moved towards yes. "Were you the thing that touched Thompson?" "Yes," it replied again. "Are you the ghost in the haunted house we were going to visit?" "No," it answered. Now this is what took me by surprise. If this was one of the others trying to scare us, why wouldn't they take the obvious bait? Claim to be the ghost we saw and commence scaring the shit out of us. I mean, that's like a Nigerian scammer writing you about your long-lost fortune and then responding no when you ask if he's able to give you $6 million instead of $5.5 million. At this point, I had a flashback of just about every creepy Ouija experience I had ever seen or read about. They always started with some cliché questions like LOL, how did you die, and ended with OMFG and a flurry of telekinetic activity. I wanted this session to be different. After all, we were a hand-picked bunch of intelligent people, not a group of scared teenagers. If this was real, I wanted this specter to break history with me. So, I took a moment and started thinking, what would I want to know about a ghost? What questions can I ask that aren't cliché? What can I ask that will break the linear decision tree, where all Ouija boards end up telling you they want you dead? I realized any questions I asked had to be extremely specific and offer no chance for creepy deviation in the answer. I suppose I could ask it for the coefficient of pi, and it could just respond with "die bitch" over and over, but I had faith in the ghost. So the first question I asked was, name one thing the building you touched Thompson and was used for. The planchette slowly started to move again. I thought to myself, this thing can't possibly get creepy from this question. I bet it will say like general store or post office, or SLAUGHTER. Pucker Factor 9. Good game, ghost, have an upvote, I guess. But seriously, I again realized this was probably not one of us joking around because slaughter has not been used as a common term since the 1800s. You don't log on to CNN and see, man slaughtered today in small house in Arizona, details at 11. If my friends were pulling a prank, the easiest verb would have been something like murder or butt sex. Intrigued, I decided to ask it why it touched Thompson. HELP, it replied. Thinking this would lead somewhere creepy, I asked when it died instead. 1867. I again started thinking of questions I could ask that no one ever thinks to ask a ghost. I remember hearing on some website that you are never supposed to ask a Ouija board about God. So I did the only logical thing an atheist would do at that point. Why aren't I supposed to ask you about God? No, came a quick, terse reply. So I tried to be more creative. I asked it, if you were playing World of Warcraft, what class would you play? It's gonna say Undead Warlock, I guarantee No, it snapped again. It was weird, despite being an entity that couldn't directly talk to us, you could almost sense its tone of voice through how it moved the planchette. I wanted to continue asking it questions, but our first sergeant interrupted the session with a frantic phone call. He ordered all of us back to base for 100% accountability due to someone losing their weapon. Disappointed, we packed up and headed back. As a soldier, my first instinct was not only to plan our arrival and departure time, but safety contingencies as well. This was especially on my mind after the previous night. I briefed the group in advance that if anything creepy happened, we were better off with a pre-identified plan on what to do so as to take the spirits by surprise. Our ghost hunting SOP was as follows. At approximately 2,000 hours, we will depart for Tombstone. This will allow us to arrive after dark. We will take 2 vehicles, Green's SUV and Jackson's coupe. Jackson and Thompson will ride in the coupe, while Green and I will ride in the SUV. Asterisk, we will set up our session in the SUV so as to allow for a quick departure if anything spooky happens. Asterisk, we will leave any weapons or sharp objects back at the base. Spirits can only harm others by proxy. If there are no objects around to throw or possess someone into using, then the only physical danger will be soiling our underwear. Asterisk, in the event of one of us feeling creeped out beyond belief or an impending sense of doom, we will give an obvious signal to the others to quickly pack up and leave. Each soldier will return to the vehicle they traveled in and take off back to the base. Upon leaving the scene, the vehicles will immediately establish contact via cell phone to ensure safety and share in a moment of, holy shit, what the fuck just happened? So it was settled. We had our plan, and were feeling confident. The undead were no match for Arizona's finest soldiers. We parked in the same lot we had the night before, and eagerly took out our Ouija board. There were 4 of us now, and we were feeling confident, but I won't lie if I told you that I was jittery as fuck. Literally everything I knew about life and the universe at this point was challenged by what we had seen the previous night. I felt like the equivalent of someone who discovers a 6-inch tall genie in their closet that only they can talk to. It literally felt surreal, like a movie. Green was especially nervous about being with us, as he was raised Catholic. Though he was no longer religious, he still had that strongly ingrained fear of Ouija boards. Green opted to just spectate as we placed the planchette on the board. There were 3 of us controlling it. We started by asking if anyone was there and received a very slow, strained yes. I asked if it was the same being we talked to the previous night, and it said no. Going off the same theme as last night, I wanted to mindfuck the ghost. I did not want to give it the opportunity to be creepy, and I wanted it to answer questions no one would think to ask. I wanted to expose the ghost's vulnerabilities. As of now, the ghost was this mysterious, all-powerful being. However, as any logical person knows, the paranormal is just science, not yet discovered. The ghost must have limits, I thought. It isn't God, and therefore has things it cannot do, things it cannot have. So I had the bright idea to ask, what is one thing you want that you cannot have? Life, it answered. I wasn't sure whether to feel like an ass, idiot, or both. Before I could decide between shame and stupidity, the interior light in Green's brand new SUV flickered.
Holy fucking shit.
That doesn't just happen. The only time I've ever seen a light flicker in a car was when it was being started. This was getting a little too real. This spirit was alpha, and it was asserting its ethereal dominance. After regaining my composure, I began to brainstorm more questions. You've been a skin at all the questions, let me give it a try, Thompson contested me. Fine, go ahead, I said. What do you want from us? He asked, in his defiant Georgia accent. STEV. Dude, there's no fucking way. I thought to myself. My name is Stephen and all, but there is no E-N. At this point, I was terrified. No one there knew my first name, but Thompson. Also, the planchette was moving in a puppet fashion, away from Thompson when it spelled it out. The best way I could describe it was an invisible thread, straight from the front of the car pulling the planchette, based on how it twisted and turned. There was no one in the front of the car. Before I could even react, the center console, which was about 5 inches ajar, closed by itself. I calmly invoked our military plan of action. Okay guys, it just spelled out my first name. Let's get the fuck out of here. No one said a word, or hesitated for a second. Thompson and Jackson scrambled out of the SUV and into Jackson's Eclipse. Green and I piled into the front seat of the SUV. Green immediately shifted to drive and peeled out of the dusty lot. I'm not sure a Ford Escape has ever been used in such a literal fashion.
Green was in shock, and so was I.
My atheist brain was questioning if God might actually be real, and Green's devout brain was pondering the opposite. Our trance was broken by Green's alt-rock ringtone. It was surreal hearing pop culture in that moment, when our brains were so far removed from reality. Green answered the phone. It was Jackson and Thompson. Their car wouldn't start. They had never left Tombstone. Green slams on the brakes and bangs a U-turn that would put Vin Diesel in diapers. He floors the modest SUV. We were going about 100 miles per hour, heading down Arizona 82 back towards Tombstone. Dude, slow the fuck down, I yelled. At this point, I was far more afraid of Green's driving than the spirits. They're our fucking friends. We can't leave them there. We knew the general direction back to Tombstone, and arrived rather quickly. Tombstone isn't as tiny as you'd imagine, and we couldn't quite remember where we had parked at. As I am trying to figure out where we are, Green freaks the fuck out. Oh my god. What, dude? I can't. I'm not driving the car anymore. What the fuck are you talking about? I can't move. As if it couldn't get any more frightening, I realized in the middle of Green's outburst that we had inadvertently ended up at the parking lot we left. I'm always trying to think logically, so I deduced the following. At this point, 2 things are possible. Green is possessed by a butthurt ghost who basically told me to check my living privilege. Green is experiencing a psychotic breakdown. Either one of those is a threat to our safety at this point, so I just started shouting at him with simple commands. If he was possessed or simply psychotic, simple instructions were the best course of action. Green, stop the car. Green, stop the car. Green, stop the car. I ordered in a commanding voice. Eventually, logic and reason fought off whatever had possessed him, and he pulled over. I switched seats with him and began driving. Right after I took over driving, Jackson called and let us know they were safe and about 10 miles down the road towards base. Green was still in a trance, but once we got about a quarter mile from ground zero, whatever triggered him without warning originally had left. This leads me to believe that if ghosts are real, they have the effective possession range of a quarter mile. Throughout the ride, we struggled to comprehend what had happened that night. Green told me that he could tell the ghost wanted me, and that it was telling him to drive down an alley, but that he came to his senses in time. He said it wanted me bad, and it wanted him to kill me. It probably would have had him attack me before we left, but our premeditated escape took it by surprise, so it stalled Jackson's car to lure us back. I asked him why it didn't just kill me itself, and he told me probably because I'm bigger than you and more emotional. You think very logically, you're a lot harder for a spirit to manipulate. Plus, I was in control of the car. This made sense and was pretty chilling to think about. If the spirit had succeeded, it would have simply hit the news as soldier murders other soldier in Tombstone. PTSD suspected. I imagine that's the case when you hear about mothers spontaneously drowning their children in a bathtub or other inexplicable murder-suicides. It's probably a ghost or a spirit, but gets blamed on psychosis. About halfway back to base, we stopped at a gas station. Green, still not completely in his right mind, opened the hatch of his SUV, took out a sunshade that came with his car, and threw it in the dumpster. What did you do that for? I don't know. It just felt evil. Really evil, he answered. That was the final straw on how real this was. It really drove in how much this was probably not an elaborate prank. Why would he go to the extent of throwing away an expensive OEM part of his car to freak me out when I was already emotionally exhausted? To this day, I am still an atheist, but I do wonder about the paranormal, as it could very well be science not yet discovered. I would imagine that communicating with a spirit is the equivalent of trying to talk to an invisible man in the room who cannot touch anything. His only way of communicating is holding a portable fan and blowing paper suspended by a string from the ceiling. He blows it right for yes and left for no. I imagine this is why they communicate in such slow and brief answers. I did a little more research on the location and posted a map and pictures for you guys below. Ironically, we were in the parking lot for the OK Corral, the famous haunted location where the outlaws had their shootout in the 1800s. From what I can gather, the gunfight happened well after 1867, but keep in mind we talked to two separate spirits. I can't help but wonder if the second one was one of them. Also, I have heard of the ideomotor effect, so if you would like to help me come up with logical explanations for what happened, keep in mind I am aware of that, and it does not explain the light flickering and the console moving. I am also aware of Occam's razor, and would welcome a shave at this point, as I think it would save my sanity. So please Reddit, convince me I'm crazy. Me and my friends are using a Ouija board for the first time. It keeps asking people to leave the room. I'm using this post to chronicle the events of this evening, as they have been truly fascinating. Some quick backstory. The small section of the city that me and my friends live is generally known to be haunted. And even if you're not a believer in the supernatural, it's at least a bit eerie. I'm not going to dox myself by stating the location, but let's just say that creepy sightings and murders/deaths due to unexplainable circumstances are our bread and butter. For most people, this means you move away as soon as they can. For folks like me and my friends who absolutely love all things spine-chilling, it generally makes for a pretty good time. Our Halloween parties are awesome. Most of our drinking nights have some sort of spooky game interlaced into them, and if you have literally nothing to do on a Friday night with your friends, you can always go on a tour of some of our haunted locales, graveyards, abandoned buildings, creepy forests, you name it. So with that background established, let's cut back to tonight. Me and my closest three pals decided to try our hand at using a Ouija board. Were we going to be normal and try the Ouija board in one of our family attics? Nah, too basic. We instead decided to trek up together to, what I shit you not, is an abandoned treehouse left in an elevated section of our city, surrounded by forests. What could go wrong, right? We climbed up to the treehouse, set down a spooky-themed rug, lit some candles, and brought out the Ouija board. Despite my pretty extensive resume of dealing with all things creepy, I'd never actually tried a Ouija board before, so I was really excited to see what would happen. We went into this excited to break every rule in the book. We weren't going to do a seance. We were going to ask whatever we want, and we didn't need to worry about being respectful to the spirit, etc. We figured if something interesting were to happen, it'd be more likely if we went in as carefree as possible. We sat in a circle around the Ouija board and got started, asking the simple question, is there a spirit with us? With all of our hands placed on the planchette. No real response. We fluttered the planchette in a few different directions, but we could tell we were kind of forcing it. We asked a few other questions. What is your name? When did you die? Etc., but nothing really came of it. After trying for the next half hour and not really getting anything in the form of a response, we decided that we probably didn't have any spooky luck tonight and opted instead to share scary stories in the treehouse. We left the Ouija board out just in case we'd get luckier later in the night. Amidst a break in our storytelling where everyone was grabbing drinks and snacks from their bags, I decided to give the Ouija board another quick go. I placed my hand on the planchette alone and whispered the following question: "Will you please grace us with your presence tonight?" Surprisingly, the planchette started moving. It's hard to explain, but you kind of know when something is moving on its own versus you sort of subtly and subconsciously moving it with your hand to force an answer. This felt real. A tingle went up my spine. It was cool as hell. My hand was moved to the following letters: Y-E-S. Awesome. I looked over to the group and told them that the Ouija board was working again. Excitedly, we all huddled around and placed our hands on the planchette. I followed up with another question. Where are you from? We sat there excitedly waiting for something. Instead, nothing. The planchette was still. The lack of any sort of external force with us was very, very obvious. Disappointing, but I had an idea I wanted to follow up with. I turned to my friend Kevin and asked him, "Do you want to try doing it solo?"
It worked for me.
Kevin was confused, but he decided to give it a try. We all backed up to give him some space with the Ouija board. He placed his hand on the planchette and repeated my question. "Where are you from?" His expression changed to shock as his hand started moving with the planchette. He turned to all of us and mouthed, "I'm not doing this," to which I excitedly mouthed back, "I know." I pulled out a notepad and recorded the answer as the planchette went from letter to letter. I recorded the following: N-O-T-I-M-P-O-R-T-A-N-T.
Love it.
A spirit with some sass. I asked Kev to back up for a sec as I approached the Ouija board, prepped for one final solo question. I asked, "Why are you only responding when it's one of us using the board?" Yet again, the planchette moved effortlessly with my hand. It was faster this time, so I said the letters out loud and had another one of my friends, Eleonora, transcribe onto my notepad. The answer was O-N-E-A-T-A-T-I-M-E. Fair enough. I thanked the spirit, my hand still on the planchette. "I appreciate your answers, friend." To my surprise, in a strange synergy between me and the spirit, I felt compelled to move the planchette again. It was the fastest it had ever been this time, as it covered the following letters: T-E-L-L-E-V-E-R-Y-O-N-E-L-S-E-T-O-L-E-A-V.
Huh.
My friends looked at me skeptically as I said the letters at a time. "Are you sure you didn't just force that on purpose?" asked Eleonora. I assured her I definitely didn't. That was definitely from the spirit. At this point, this had been the most clearly supernatural phenomena I'd ever experienced in my life, and I was excited to keep it going. My friends, usually unflinching and made of ice, were a little bit thrown. Eleonora and Martin looked ever so slightly spooked, but Kev was willing to go with it. "Might as well see where this goes," Kev said, as he started climbing down from the treehouse. With a slight bit of hesitation, Eleonora and Martin followed suit.
Sweet.
An actually creepy night. I embraced the quiet amidst the lighting of the candles and the power of the Ouija board. I geared up for my next question. I wasn't going to hold back. "Spirit, how will I die?" I took in a deep breath, waiting for some movement. Slowly. D-E-P-E-N-D-S. Interesting answer, if not a bit underwhelming. I geared up for my follow-up. "Oh, come on, spirit, what about something a bit more specific?" My hand moved with the planchette to the following letters. I tried hard to focus and connect the letters since I didn't have anyone to transcribe with me. W-H-A-T-I-S-Y-O-U-R-N-A-M-E?
Weird.
Completely dodged my question and asked me my name. Okay, all-knowing spirit, I assumed you'd already know that. I decided to try tricking it. "My name is Belle." Movement from the planchette on the Ouija board. It took me to the letters. D-O-N-O-T-L-I-E. H-M. Well played, spirit. I gave the spirit my actual name, Jennifer, and continued to see the follow-up response. WHATISYOURFAVORITFOOD. Honoring the spirit's rules, I opted to tell the truth instead of following up with another lie. Your girl loves dinner, and this spirit deserves to know that. The Ouija board's response. CORRECT. Before I could take in the affirmation from the spirit, who is asking who questions here, spirit, it followed up with yet another question. WHATISYOURBIGGSTFEARDONOTLIE. This question took me aback a bit. I wasn't really afraid of anything, or so I thought. So I struggled with it. It took me a few moments. I really thought of it. I kind of cringed at the answer, but it was my truth. Something horrible happening to my little brother. No movement from the Ouija board. Seconds turned into minutes as I kept my hand awkwardly placed on the planchette. Then finally, THANKYOUSENDELEONORA.
Welp.
I obliged. I thanked the spirit for its time and decided to climb down from the treehouse, where my friends were waiting. I passed on the spirit's message and told Eleonora that it was her turn. Martin, Kev, and I spent what must have been 15 minutes standing outside the treehouse while Eleonora was up there. We'd pulled drinks out of our bags and were discussing my experience with the Ouija board so far. Both were incredibly surprised when I told them that the spirit was asking me questions. What kinds of questions? Generic stuff, like my name, favorite food, etc. I answered. Weird. Both Kev and Martin seemed a bit thrown off by it, but I was excited. We looked up at the treehouse as we heard the sounds of someone climbing down. Eleonora had finished her session. She looked traumatized. How was it? I asked her.
Weird.
All it did was ask me questions. Questions like, Kevin asked her, my name, my favorite hobby, my, biggest fear. That one took me a while to answer. Kev turned to me. That is a little bit eerie, he said. I agreed. Didn't look like Eleonora was loving it either. But still, a spirit asking us questions? This had been one of the coolest, if not the coolest, paranormal experiences I'd ever experienced in my life. Eleonora turned to Martin. It said that you were up next. Martin's session seemed longer than the others. We stood outside, drinking, talking about the happenings so far, and pulling out the occasional snack. That was a little bit traumatizing, said Eleonora. Kevin pointed to her, and then up to the treehouse. Agreed. This is kind of messed up, he said. Yeah, but that's the point. I responded. We seek out spooky happenings all the time, and we never get lucky. This is an actual legit supernatural experience. I feel like we have to take advantage of it. Even if it's asking us personal stuff? What does it want this info for? Followed up Eleonora. I shrugged. While the biggest fear question was pretty weird, I didn't feel too worried that a spirit knew my favorite food was or what my name was. Our conversation was interrupted by the sound of someone climbing down from the treehouse. Martin had finished up his session. It felt like it had been 30 minutes, which topped the rest of our sessions. We bombarded Martin with questions as he reached the ground. He looked more shell-shocked than Eleonora did. That was pretty fucked up, he started. What did it ask you? I asked enthusiastically. My biggest fear, Martin responded. It's weird, but it felt like it didn't like my answer to that one. It almost seemed annoyed. So was it just silent for a while after that? I asked. No, it asked me way more things after that. What the happiest moment in my life was, who I was the most jealous of, what my biggest life dream was. All that stuff. It was a lot of questions. Then, finally, it just wrapped up with thank you, and that was that. Martin turned to Kevin. You're up next. Kevin turned to all of us. Here goes nothing. He sighed and started climbing up to the treehouse. We watched him make his way to the top. For the first time in the evening, I had a knot in my stomach. Only 5 minutes had passed since Kevin first went up, but he was already climbing down. He was shaking his head as he made his way down the ladder and to our group. Fuck that, said Kevin. What happened? We asked him. He just shook his head. That shit is dangerous. We need to get the fuck out of here. ASAP. I'd never seen Kevin like this. He was uncharacteristically shook. You have to tell us more. What did it ask you? What did it say? But Kevin ignored all of our questions. He started packing up his bag. You guys can play with fire if you want, but I'm out of here. I suggest you guys come too, he said. I watched as Martin and Eleonora started packing up as well. I had bad feelings throughout this whole thing. I think we should leave, said Martin. Guys, what the hell? Just cause it's unsettling doesn't mean we have to pack up. We can just hang out up there and do something else, I said back. This doesn't feel right, said Eleonora. I watched them as they all took a few steps away from the treehouse and towards the forest. You coming? Asked Kevin. I stood my ground. Kevin just shook his head and started heading out on his way. Suit yourself. I had no idea what could have possibly happened up there that would have shook him this much. He had already started walking as Martin and Eleonora pleaded with me to come with them. I said no. Begrudgingly, they all left. You're probably wondering, wasn't I scared? Especially now that I was alone? The answer was yes. But something in my soul told me that I was up next. I'd spent my whole life waiting for something that was truly supernatural to happen, and now it was in front of me. With my fingers jittering, I climbed up to the treehouse as my friends departed. It took me a moment to pull together the bravery to put my hand on the planchette. The candles were still lit. The setting was just right. Finally, I spoke to the spirit again. Why are you asking us all these questions? Nothing for a few minutes. Then, my hand moved with the planchette, slower than usual. The answer? TOCONFIRMMYSUSPICIONS. Confirm your suspicions of what? Movement from the planchette on the Ouija board. ONEOFYOUISNOTWHOYOUSAYYOUARE. What are you talking about? I heard blood-curdling shrieks coming from the forest outside the treehouse. Like nothing I'd ever heard before. What the fuck? The planchette was moving on its own now. I watched it go from letter to letter. THATISNOTKEVIN. HEISCOMINGBACKFORYOU. RUN. And so I did. The small section of the city I live in is generally known to be haunted. I think I know why. It's time for me to leave.